Put your faith in the light.
Hello guys, welcome to another one of my videos. This is Lightblade, and well guys, in this one I wanted to talk about trinkets and well, do a list of all the trinkets that are going to be in next patch, including Mythic Plus and Raid trinkets. One thing I have to say here first is that Raid trinkets are pretty damn strong, you know. As always, Blizzard has put the best trinkets in the game in raids. Mythic Plus trinkets are decent, mostly just stat sticks that can get you pretty decent damage, you know, but they're nothing in comparison to the stuff they put in raids. So we're gonna rate them on a scale of 1 to 10, and so it's easier to navigate for you guys, I'm gonna put timestamps of each trinket in the description of the video. With that being said, let's start with trinkets that you can get in Mythic Plus. Okay, let's start with the oldest dungeon where we can get trinkets, and this is the Throne of the Tides. So here we have two trinkets that we can get. The first one is the Might of the Ocean, which is an unused trinket that has a 1.5 minute cooldown. It gives you a bunch of strength when you use it, and it has passive critical strike. Nothing really incredible about this trinket, you know, it's just pretty average. If you can get it early, it can help you just progress through your keys, you know. You just bind it to your wings and use it that way. Since it's a 1.5 minute cooldown trinket, you're always going to lose a bit of value on this thing because our wings is a 1 minute cooldown thing, so you're always losing that 30-second window. I'm gonna give this trinket a 6 out of 10. Nothing incredible, pretty average. The next one is the Porcelain Crab. So this trinket is pretty odd because it has Burst as a passive, and the proc gives you Mastery. Normally trinket has either a passive main stat and then a proc of secondary, but this one just has double secondary procs, which is not bad, you know. Actually, we've seen trinkets like this have used, for example, in the last season of Shadowlands, we had a trinket that came from the train dungeon where you got a trinket that had passive burst and unused more burst, you know. So this is basically the same idea, just on a proc. And it gives you, like I said before, burst as the passive and mastery as its procs, you know, pretty decent. I think this is also a really average trinket depending on how tuning goes. I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. I don't think it's going to be anything incredible, but if you get it early at a high item level, it can help you progress through your keys. Now let's go to the next dungeon. Okay, the next trinket we're going to talk about comes from the dungeon Everbloom from Waters of Draenor. This is the Spores of Alacrity. This trinket is pretty decent. It has main stat strength and a haste proc that lasts for 10 seconds. The proc rate is also pretty high, just under a minute, which means this trinket is going to be on you between 25 to 30% of the dungeon. Really good. I'm gonna give this trinket a 7 out of 10. While nothing spectacular, it's going to get the job done. Now let's go to the next dungeon. Okay, the next dungeons we're going to talk about are the Legion Dungeons era, and there's two trinkets here. Sadly, both of them were pretty garbage. Let's talk first about the one that comes from Blackroot Coiled, and this is the Spiked Counterweight. This thing was bad back in Legion, and I think it's going to still be bad now in Dragonflight. So the thing has the passive haste, so that's a pretty decent stat, you know. And it has a proc, which is a single target proc that your melee attacks have a chance to deal a bunch of physical damage and increase the damage your target takes by 15%, but it has a cap, you know, so you're never going to do like incredible damage with this. It's just going to do a proc of a set amount of damage. Still, nothing incredible. It doesn't have main stats, doesn't help you in any way, shape, or form in AoE scenarios. It's just a pure single target trinket. I think it's going to be pretty bad. I'm gonna give this trinket like a 2 out of 10. You know, if you get it and you don't have anything else to use that's higher item level, I guess you use it. But for the most part, I would avoid this trinket. It's not very good. Now let's go to the next dungeon from this era, and this is Darkheart Thicket. Darkheart Thicket also has a trinket that's pretty underwhelming, and this is the Nightmare Eggshell. This is a stat trinket that has haste as its proc and main stat strength. The haste proc is lasts for 20 seconds. You might say, oh, that's a long time, like, you know, but the thing is it ramps, so it starts very weak and then every second it gets more and more haste. Sadly, this is kind of bad because you get the max value at the last second of this thing, you know, so you're not getting the max value of the string for the most duration of the proc. It's just not very good. Also, the proc rate of this thing is not very high, you know. I think it's very low. It's like once every 1.5 minutes, so it's not a really good trinket. I'm gonna give it just because it has main stat strength makes it better than the spiked counter rate. So I'm gonna give it 4 out of 10, you know. If you don't have anything else that's higher item level than this, then obviously use it, but not a very good trinket by any stretch of the imagination. So now let's go to the next dungeons. Okay, now let's go to the BFA era dungeons, and these two dungeons have your go-to stat stick trinkets. Unlike the Legion ones, these ones are pretty damn decent. So first, Atal Dazar. Atal Dazar has the good old Razan's Gleaming Eye. This is just a stat stick that has main stat strength, and it has a proc of haste. Unlike the egg thing from Legion, this haste it gives the haste to you immediately. You know, for 15 seconds, it has a pretty decent proc rate. You will have it between 25 to 30% of the dungeon most of the times. The proc is also hasted, so the more haste you have, the more it's going to proc, which is pretty good, you know. So if you want a haste trinket on a stick, this is your go-to. You know, I'm gonna give this trinket a 7 out of 10. It's nothing super incredible, but it's a pretty damn decent trinket. Now let's go to the next dungeon of this era. And this is Waycrest Manor. So Waycrest Manor also has a pretty damn good stat stick. This is the Gore-Crested Butcher's Block. This trinket is also a really decent one. It has main stat strength and a proc of critical strike. The proc also lasts for 15 seconds, has the same properties as the Razan one. It's hasted, so the more haste you have, the more it's going to proc. Has a proc rate between 25% to 30% of the dungeon if you use it there. And it's a pretty damn good trinket, you know. I think it's a bit better than Razan's Gleaming Eye because you feel the critical strike proc a bit more than the haste ones, you know, because you're like critting more, you know, numbers are bigger and all those kinds of things. So yeah, if you need critical strike on your red pally, this is a pretty damn decent trinket. I'm gonna give it again 7 out of 10. That's not bad. That's a pretty decent trinket. If you get it, use it. Now let's go to the next dungeons. Okay, let's talk about the Dragonflight dungeon, Dawn of the Infinite. This is going to be divided into 2 parts, and each part is going to get one good trinket. You know, these trinkets are actually a step up above the other trinkets of the other dungeons. The first part has the Accelerating Sunglass. This thing has main stat strength and a 2-part passive. So first off, your attacks drain the hourglass, giving you a chance to gain haste up to 8 times before the sun runs out. Whenever that effect ends, you're going to get a damage proc depending on how many stacks of haste you had. So this trinket is really damn good. You know, it helps you in AoE, it helps you in single targets, really good. I'm gonna give it 8 out of 10. You know, I think it's one of the best passive trinkets you can get from Mythic Plus. So if you're only doing Mythic Plus and you don't raid, I think this is going to be one of your best. Okay, the next part has also a really good trinket. This is the Mirror Refractor Tomorrows. It has main stat strength, and when you use it, you gain a massive amount, a secondary stat. I think normally it's your highest secondary stat. Yeah, it's your highest secondary stat. The only downside of this trinket, it's a 3-minute cooldown one. So in a Mythic Plus setting, you're going to be very mindful on where you use it. But when you use this thing, it's going to blast, you know. So I'm thinking this trinket is also going to be an 8 out of 10. Really, really strong trinket that you can get from Mythic Plus if you can manage the cooldown. You know, if you can find really good places to use it and get the most value out of it, it's going to be really, really good. Now let's go to the raid trinkets. Okay guys, now we're at the raid trinkets part. For these ones, I'm actually going to do the testing so you guys can see what they do, because they do have very wonky effects. You know, they're really strong effects, but they have like really weird interactions. By the way, the theme of this raid is Shadow Flame is self-harm, you know. These trinkets have like backlash effects. Most of the trinkets that are themed around Shadow Flame have this, but they're really strong because of this. But first, we're going to talk about the most simple trinket of the raid, and this is Pip's Emerald Friendship Badge. This trinket is really, really good. It's just a stat stick of this trinket. It's the equivalent of the Chromatic Essence from the last one, you know. Whenever you use it, it's going to give you main stat strength, and the effect is when you equip it, you join the Dream Team, gaining either Mastery, Verse, or Critical Strike, depending on your best friend, you know. So I think it picks a random best friend, so I equip it and it's Pip. This means that I have a bunch of mastery as passive, and it also has a proc. Whenever it procs, it's going to give you a stat depending on the other friends. You know, the other friends would be in this case verse or mastery. So I'm gonna get either verse or mastery proc, you know, and then it just rotates around. You're going to get verse, and then you're going to get a proc of mastery or crit, you know, so and so on and so forth. Pretty good. Just a stat stick. I'm gonna give this trinket 8 out of 10. Good, just nothing incredible, because you're gonna see there's other stuff that's really damn strong from this place. Let's go to the next trinket. Okay, the next trinket we're going to talk about comes from the first boss of the raid, and it's the Branch of the Tormented Ancient. So this trinket is nothing really incredible, you know, it's just a good trinket. It has main stat strength, which just makes it always good, you know. Strength just gives it a lot of power, and it has an on use on a 2.5 minute cooldown, you know. So you can compare it to something like the Zakili chain, you know, from the other raid. It just does damage. It's a pretty long cooldown, but the damage is pretty decent. So as you can see here in the demonstration, it summons 4 roots that slow you by 15% per root. That doesn't really matter at all because you can break them instantly, as you saw there. And it does damage, you know, it does damage split depending on how many targets there is. On a raid fighter version, this thing did about 700k damage, as you can see here. It's probably going to do more on the higher versions, you know, but just a decent trinket. I'm gonna give it 8 out of 10, you know. It's nothing incredible, but like flat damage trinkets are pretty decent. Red Paladin has used them in the previous patches, so I'm thinking it's just going to be okay, you know. Let's go to the next trinket. Okay, the next trinket we're going to talk about is the Coiled Serpent idol from the 3rd boss. I'm gonna say it here first, it's not a very good trinket. It has main stat strength, and then the proc is pretty underwhelming, you know. I tested this thing for 2 minutes. Let's read the proc first. So your critical strikes have a chance to summon a lava serpent that attacks your target for 10 seconds. It does damage every 2 seconds, you know, and every 3rd serpent you summon, instead of 1, you will call 3. It also has a small like AoE effect if your target dies, you know. The serpent enrages and does AoE damage up to 8 nearby targets. So yeah, it has some AoE, it has mostly single target damage. It's not very good though, you know. Although I have been wrong in the past, I tested this thing for 2 minutes straight, you know, and it did 0.9% of my damage in that duration, you know. So I wouldn't say the proc is really, really good. Maybe if you have your target die and the serpent like explodes and does the AoE damage, it can be better in AoE situations. But I'm seeing this trinket mostly as a single target trinket, you know. Doing 0.9% of your damages, I don't think enough to justify this thing. I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10, you know, just to be cautious, you know. I have been wrong in the past sometimes, you know, on these trinkets, but I'm pretty confident this is not going to be a good one. Now let's go to the next trinket. Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff, you know. The next 3 trinkets are going to be really, really damn strong. 2 of them come from the same boss, by the way. So this is Smolderon, and the trinkets, well, the first one we're going to talk about is the Cataclysmic Signet brand. So this thing is basically the Anvil trinket from their last raid. Anvil was really damn strong. It was a huge DPS increase for a lot of specs, you know. It did a lot of damage, especially on single target. This is basically the same idea. So it has main stat strength, and your melee attacks and abilities have a chance to visually brand your target. So they're gonna deal damage over time and give you a stack of fire starter. This thing can stack up to 15 times, and damage increase per stack to a maximum, a big number, you know. Okay, so it has conditions. After 5 stacks, it will also do 50% of its damage to you. That really doesn't matter at all. It basically does like 3k damage every time it procs. It's really, really weak. So it's really weak on you. It's a really good effect on your enemy. At 15 stacks, enemies near your target will suffer 10% of the damage split between them. So it has a small AoE effect, you know. And it also has the same decay effect as the Anvil, you know. Anvil didn't decay, but if you didn't hit something in 10 seconds, it just went away, you know. I think it was 15 or 10. Anyways, it just went away. This thing decays every 5 seconds. You lose a stack, and if you're out of combat for 15 seconds, it just goes away completely. Here in the test, I hit the target dummy for 4 minutes and I got the 15 stacks, you know. So you can stack it a bit faster than Anvil, because for Anvil you needed 5 minutes to stack it fully. So this thing stacks a bit faster than Anvil. I don't think it does as much damage as Anvil, but you don't really have to press anything to it gets the effect, which is a lot better, you know. In Mythic Plus settings, this thing can have a lot of value in Tyrannical, but you might have to like play perfectly, you know, like taunt critters, like keep yourself in combat for the whole duration of the dungeon is sometimes pretty hard, you know. So yeah, well, this thing looks really, really powerful. It has a lot of conditions to get its max value, but it is powerful. So I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10 in both Mythic Plus and single target scenarios for raid, because I'm thinking that if you can keep yourself in combat in Mythic Plus, this is going to be really strong. And in raids, you're always in combat, so it's going to be strong anyways, unless let's say your rating just downs bosses too fast where you can't stack it to fully, you know. Okay, so now let's go to the next trinket. Okay guys, so the next trinket we're going to be talking about is the Ashes of Embersoul. So this trinket is really damn powerful. So I think this is going to be one of our best. It has haste as its passive stat, and the on use is really strong. It's something we've Red Pal has been asking for a while, you know, getting a good 2-minute trinket that we can pair with wings. You know, you're gonna have this every other wing, and we don't lose any value, so you will always going to get the full power of this thing. The on-use is draw power from the remnants of Embersoul, gaining a bunch of strength for 20 seconds. It decays every 3, and once the effect ends, you became burnt out. So you're going to get a little debuff, as you can see here, and you're going to lose a small amount of haste, you know, 624 at raid finder item level, which is not a big deal, you know, for 1 minute before recovery. But it has another effect where you can actually proc this thing again as a passive when circumstances are dire. So in the demonstration, you're going to see that I dropped under 20% health. That's when circumstances are dire. You have to be under 20% health. I tried this at 30%, didn't work. 20% seems the cutoff, you know, where circumstances are dire. Your soul ignites and you get the bonus effect again. So you can't get this bonus while you have the burnt out effect, you know, so the debuff. But after 1 minute passes, after you use the trinket, you can, if you drop your health really low to 20%, you can get this effect again as a passive. So you can actually get it on your next wings if you dropped low enough. So there is an optimal way you can play this. You know, you use it once, you wait 60 seconds, you get your next round of wings, you go stand in the boss ability, so your health drops to 20%, you get the extra proc and use it on your wings. That would be the optimal settings, but I'm seeing that a lot of people are going to die because they're going to try to do this. So this effect may only occur once per combat. So on a raid fight, you can only do this once because you never go out of combat in raid fights. But in Mythic Plus settings, you're going in and out of combat all the time. So let's say you use it first, you know, for your first wings. You go to another pack. Okay, so a minute passes, you go to another pack, you taunt a mob, so it hits you, you know, you drop to 20% health, you get the effect again, you pop wings, and then you use it again. So this thing is going to be really damn strong. And the second time you use it by the way, this effect doesn't decay, so you get the full, like, a huge amount of strength without decay. So this is just going to be really damn good trinket. I'm gonna give this a 10 out of 10. You know, I rarely do this, but I'm seeing a lot of possibilities with this trinket. Just really strong. But I'm also seeing a lot of people that are going to die because of the greed, you know, to get the second part of the effect. It's going to be a really good trinket, but you gotta be careful, you know. And I think we can pull it off. We're really damn tanky. So at 20% health, you know, you get to that threshold and you pop your Shield of Vengeance, and then you can, like, pop off, you know, and survive, get all the full value of this thing. Okay, now let's go to the next trinket. Okay guys, so the last trinket we're going to talk about is also a really powerful one. You know, I'm thinking it's going to be also one of our best trinkets, and this comes from Firak the Blazing. You know, this trinket is called Augury of the Primal Flame. This is a very rare drop, so you're probably going to see this only on your vault after you kill Firak. It's going to be really hard to see it as a normal drop. Okay, so it only has critical strike as its passive stat, but the effect is super strong. Your spells and abilities have a low chance to grant Annihilating Flame for 20 seconds, causing your critical strikes to deal 50% additional damage as fire split between nearby enemies. So if it's hitting one target, it's doing full damage. If it hits multiple targets, it deals increased damage up to 5 targets. The flame may deal a set amount of damage, so it has a cap of the critical strike extra damage that you can do, but it's not a flat cap. You know, it can scale higher. It's increased by the effects of critical strike and versatility, and it also is increased if it strikes multiple enemies. So if it hits more targets, the cap gets bigger. If you have more critical strike, the cap gets bigger. If you have more burst, the cap gets even bigger, you know. So this thing is going to scale like a monster trinket the more stats we are going to be getting, you know. As Red Paladins, this trinket synergizes really well with us because we have ways of guaranteeing critical strike hits. Templar strikes always crits the second hit. We are in single target, we can use Hammer of Wrath that also guarantees critical strike, you know, 100% critical chance. We have wings that give us more critical strike chance. So we have pretty good synergy with this trinket. I'm gonna give this a 10 out of 10. It's a really damn good trinket in both raid and mythic plus scenarios because does strike multiple enemies, and the cap also scales bigger with that. And well guys, that's my recap of all the trinkets that are going to come in the next patch. Notice that this may change depending on tuning. There's still like I think 5 or 6 weeks before the patch launches. We're not sure about that, but those are the rumors. Still, I'm a bit sad that it's again another one of those tiers that is going to be raid or die. You know, if you want to get the best trinkets, there's no other way around it. So if you're a Mythic Plus player and you want to push really high, you're probably going to also need to raid, you know, at least up to heroic level. You know, that's I think pretty accessible for everyone, so you can get like one of those like super powerful trinkets that those last 3 bosses can drop. You know, those are really damn strong, especially the unused 2-minute one. I'm thinking that thing is going to be huge in Mythic Plus dungeons, especially because the second part you can actually use a Mythic Plus pretty often. You know, you can use it almost as a 1-minute trinket, which is really damn strong. And the last boss trinket, that thing is going to scale like a monster. Anyways guys, that's going to be all for the video today. I hope you enjoyed the content, and if you do, subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the videos. Thanks for watching everyone.